Many people believe that aging is mostly about genetics or luck. But in everyday life, aging is shaped much more by small habits than we often realize. Not dramatic habits. Not sudden changes. Just ordinary routines that feel familiar and comfortable. As the years pass, these habits slowly shape how steady we feel, how clear our thinking is, and how independent daily life remains. What makes this tricky is that most of these habits don't feel harmful. They don't cause immediate problems. They don't come with warning signs. In fact, many of them feel perfectly normal. Some even feel sensible. That's why they're easy to overlook. Today, we're going to gently look at 7 habits to avoid as you age. Not to judge them. Not to force change. But simply to notice them. Because awareness comes before adjustment. This video is not about doing everything right. And it's not about becoming someone new. It's about understanding how small, repeated choices can quietly influence comfort, energy, and independence over time. You may recognize some of these habits in yourself. You may recognize them in people you care about. Or you may simply listen and reflect. There is no pressure to change everything. Sometimes, noticing just one habit is enough to shift how a day feels. We'll take this slowly. One habit at a time. With real-life situations that many people experience as they grow older. And as you listen, you might find yourself thinking, I do that sometimes. Or, I hadn't thought about it that way before. That moment of recognition is exactly where healthy aging begins. So let's start with the first habit. One that lives quietly in the background of everyday thoughts. And often goes unnoticed for years. Before we talk about physical routines or daily schedules, it's important to begin with something even more subtle. Because the first habit isn't about what you eat. Or how much you move. It's about the way you speak to yourself. Especially as you get older. Let's begin with the first habit. The first habit many people develop as they age is negative self-talk. Because it doesn't happen out loud. It happens quietly, inside your own thoughts. Negative self-talk often sounds practical. It sounds reasonable. And that's why it's easy to accept without question. Phrases like, I'm too old for that now. It's probably not worth trying. That's just how things are at my age. These thoughts don't arrive all at once. They build slowly, over time. Often after a small setback, a moment of tiredness, or a change in routine. What matters is not that these thoughts appear. That's human. What matters is what happens when they begin to guide daily choices. Someone might stop walking a little farther than usual. Stop calling a friend. Stop trying something new, even something small. Not because they can't, but because they quietly decided it wasn't for them anymore. Over time, this kind of self-talk can shrink daily life. Not dramatically, just little by little. The goal here is not to replace every thought with optimism. And it's not about pretending everything feels easy. It's simply about noticing the tone you use with yourself. When a thought feels limiting, you can pause. You don't have to argue with it. You don't have to fix it. You can gently ask, is this a fact, or is it just a habit of thinking? Often, that small pause is enough to soften the moment. And a softened moment leaves room for choice. Healthy aging doesn't require constant confidence. It begins with allowing yourself a little more kindness. Especially in the quiet moments no one else hears. Now, that first habit lives mostly in the mind. But the next one shows up in a much more visible way. It's part of everyday routines. Often associated with comfort. And rarely questioned, even though it quietly affects energy throughout the day. Let's move to the second habit. The second habit shows up in daily routines around food, especially sugar and highly processed options. Not harmful. Not risky. It's part of everyday routines. Moments of rest. Moments of ease. A sweet biscuit with tea. Something quick when cooking feels tiring. Foods that feel familiar and reassuring. There's nothing unusual about this. These choices usually come from convenience, not from neglect. The challenge isn't one food. And it isn't an occasional treat. The challenge is the pattern. The quiet repetition. Day after day. Over time, highly processed foods and added sugar begin to shape the rhythm of the day. Many people notice the change first in their energy, not in their health. Feeling alert in the morning, then slowing down by midday. Feeling heavy after meals, or needing small snacks just to stay steady. Because this happens gradually, it's easy to dismiss. It's just age. It's normal to feel tired. But often, age isn't the main reason. It's the way energy rises and falls, depending on what the body is given to work with. Highly processed foods tend to create quick boosts, then quieter drops. Not dramatic crashes, just subtle dips. Over time, these dips make everyday tasks feel heavier. Walking, focusing, staying engaged. Not because someone doesn't want to, but because everything feels slightly more effortful. This is not about restriction. And it's not about removing comfort. Healthy aging does not require perfection or strict rules. It begins with noticing, without judgment. How does the body feel an hour after breakfast? Does energy stay steady or fade quickly? How does lunch feel afterward? Comfortable or unusually tiring? These are quiet signals. They don't demand action. They simply offer information. Many people find that small adjustments help, not big changes. Choosing foods that feel familiar, but less processed. Adding something simple, instead of replacing everything. Allowing sweetness to be intentional, not automatic. For some, this means slowing down at breakfast. For others, it means noticing why snacking happens. Hunger or habit. There is no single right approach. What matters is support. When energy feels steadier, daily life feels easier. Movement feels more inviting. Focus lasts longer. The day becomes less demanding. This is how food connects to independence. Quietly, without rules. This habit often stays in place because it feels earned and familiar. But gentle awareness can change the relationship without taking away enjoyment. Healthy aging isn't about giving things up. It's about choosing what helps the day feel lighter. If this habit feels familiar, there's no need to change anything today. Simply noticing how your energy feels is enough for now. You're welcome to keep listening. So far, we've talked about habits that affect energy quietly, through thoughts, and through food. The next habit is different. It's not about thinking, and it's not about eating. It's about what happens when the body stays still for too long. Let's move on to the third habit. The third habit is spending long periods sitting, often without realizing how much time has passed. It doesn't feel like a habit at first. It feels like rest. Sitting down to read. Sitting down to watch something familiar. Sitting down because standing feels unnecessary. And then staying there. A little longer each day. This habit often grows after retirement. Or after a change in health. Or simply because there's less reason to move around as much as before. What makes prolonged sitting tricky is that it feels harmless. Even sensible. After all, rest is important. And sitting feels restful. The problem isn't sitting itself. It's sitting for long periods without interruption. When the body stays still for too long, It begins to adjust to that stillness. Muscles do less work. Joints move less. Circulation slows gently. Not in a dramatic way, just gradually. Many people notice the effects in small moments. Standing up feels stiffer than it used to. Balance feels slightly less steady. Walking takes a bit more effort. Because these changes appear slowly, they're easy to accept as normal aging. But often, they're more about habit than age. The body is designed for movement. Not intense movement. Just regular movement. When movement becomes rare, confidence often follows. Someone might hesitate to walk as far, or avoid going out unless necessary. Not because they can't, but because the body feels less prepared. This habit doesn't require exercise plans or schedules to address, and it doesn't require pushing through discomfort. It begins with interruption, breaking up sitting time, standing for a moment, shifting position, taking a few steps. Even small movements send a clear message to the body. I'm still here. I still need you to respond. Many people find that setting gentle reminders helps. Not alarms, just cues. Standing when a program ends. Moving while waiting for the kettle. Walking to another room instead of staying seated. These movements don't need to be productive. They don't need to be counted. They simply keep the body familiar with motion. Over time, regular movement supports steadiness. Not speed. Not strength goals. Just steadiness. Movement also affects how the day feels. Energy circulates more evenly. Stiffness doesn't build up as quickly. The body feels more cooperative. This habit often remains unnoticed because sitting feels earned, and rest feels deserved. And both are true. The key is balance. Rest, with movement woven gently in. Healthy aging isn't about doing more. It's about staying connected to the body in simple ways. Standing up regularly. Moving often enough to remind the body what it knows how to do. So far, we've talked about habits that shape daily life quietly. Through thoughts. Through food. And through movement. The next habit is different. It doesn't live in the body. And it doesn't live in routines. It lives in memories. And in feelings that are carried for a long time. Let's move on to the fourth habit. The fourth habit involves holding on to old resentments longer than we realize. It's not a habit people choose on purpose. It forms slowly. Over many years. It lives in memories. In experiences that didn't turn out as expected. In words that were said, or never said. Holding on to old resentments often feels like self-protection. A way of honoring what happened. A way of saying, that mattered. Many people tell themselves they've moved on. And in some ways they have. They continue with daily life. They fulfill responsibilities. They stay functional. But unresolved feelings don't disappear. They settle quietly in the background. Sometimes they show up as irritation. Sometimes as emotional distance. Sometimes as a low, steady heaviness that's hard to explain. Not dramatic anger. Just tension. Because this tension has been there for so long, it can feel normal. Almost invisible. But carrying emotional weight requires energy. Every day. Even when we're not actively thinking about it. Over time, this can affect mood, patience, and how open someone feels toward others. It may become harder to enjoy simple moments. Harder to feel relaxed around certain people. Harder to feel fully present. Letting go of resentment does not mean rewriting the past. And it does not mean excusing what happened. It simply means deciding how much space the past is allowed to take up today. For some people, the first step is acknowledgement. Quietly admitting, this still affects me. For others, It's noticing when old feelings are being carried into new situations, pausing, and choosing not to let them guide the moment. Sometimes release happens through expression, writing thoughts down, speaking them aloud to someone trusted. Other times, release happens through acceptance, not resolution, just acceptance that the past is complete. This process doesn't need to be fast, and it doesn't need to be perfect. Healthy aging is not about emotional cleanup. It's about emotional balance. Even a small softening can make a difference. The body relaxes more easily. Reactions feel less sharp. The day feels lighter. When resentment loosens its grip, people often notice more space. Space for calm. Space for connection. Space for enjoyment. Holding on may feel familiar, but gently releasing often creates room for peace, without erasing the past. So far, we've explored habits that shape life quietly, through thoughts, through food, through movement, and through long-held feelings. The next habit shifts the focus outward. It's less about what we carry inside, and more about who we stay connected to, or slowly drift away from. Let's move on to the fifth habit. The fifth habit develops when social connection slowly fades from daily life. It doesn't feel like isolation, and it doesn't feel intentional. It feels like staying home a bit more, answering the phone a bit less, letting invitations pass without much thought. Often, this habit forms after a change. Retirement, the loss of a partner or close friend, moving to a new place, or simply feeling that social effort takes more energy than it used to. At first, being alone can feel peaceful, calm, even relieving. And there is nothing wrong with enjoying solitude. The challenge begins when connection fades slowly, without being replaced. Days become quieter. Conversations become shorter. Laughter becomes less frequent. Not because someone doesn't value people, but because reaching out starts to feel inconvenient, or uncomfortable, or unnecessary. Many people tell themselves they prefer being on their own. And sometimes, that's true. But over time, a lack of regular connection can change how days feel. Mood becomes flatter. Motivation becomes lower. Sleep can feel lighter or more restless. These changes are subtle. They don't feel dramatic. And that's why they're easy to overlook. Human connection doesn't have to be deep or constant to matter. It doesn't require long conversations or busy social calendars. Simple interactions count. A brief phone call, a familiar face at a local place, a short chat with a neighbor, a shared routine. These moments remind the mind that it's part of something beyond itself. Without them, days can begin to blur together. Time feels slower, and it becomes easier to withdraw further. This habit often reinforces itself. The less connected someone feels, the harder it becomes to reach out. Not because they don't want to, but because it feels awkward to restart. Healthy aging does not mean being surrounded by people all the time. And it does not mean forcing friendships. It means maintaining gentle points of connection, at a pace that feels comfortable. For some, that might mean one regular activity each week. For others, it might mean keeping one relationship active. Even something as small as a familiar routine outside the home. Connection supports emotional balance. It supports memory. And it supports a sense of purpose in daily life. Not loudly, but steadily. Staying socially connected is not about doing more. It's about staying lightly engaged with the world. As you listen, you may notice this habit in your own life, or in someone you care about. If a thought comes up, you're welcome to sit with it for a moment. And if you feel like sharing, you may leave a comment about what connection means to you at this stage of life. Only if you wish. So far, we've talked about habits that affect the mind, the body, and our sense of connection with others. The next habit is different again. It shows up at night, and it quietly influences how the next day feels. Let's move on to the sixth habit. The sixth habit is quietly ignoring ongoing sleep difficulties and adjusting to feeling tired. Because it happens at night. And because many people believe it's simply part of getting older. Trouble falling asleep. Waking up often. Or waking up too early and feeling unrest. These experiences are common. But common does not always mean unimportant. Many people learn to live with poor sleep. They adjust expectations. They push through the day feeling tired. They might say, "I don't need as much sleep anymore," or "I'll rest later." The challenge is that sleep quietly shapes how the entire day feels. Not just energy, but mood and focus. When sleep is fragmented, mornings often start slowly. Concentration feels harder to maintain. Small tasks require more effort. Because this becomes routine, it's easy to stop noticing the connection. Fatigue feels like the background of life, not a signal. Poor sleep doesn't always feel dramatic. It can feel dull, flat, or slightly foggy. And because it's not alarming, it's often ignored. Another reason sleep issues persist is habit. Evening routines, late stimulation, irregular schedules, small patterns that build over time. Bright lights late at night, television or phones close to bedtime, eating heavy meals too late, staying mentally busy until the moment the lights go out. None of these feel serious on their own. But together, they can make rest harder to come by. Sleep also changes with age. Bodies need more time to wind down, and more consistency to feel settled. Ignoring sleep difficulties doesn't mean something is wrong. It simply means the body isn't getting the rest it needs to reset. Healthy aging does not require perfect sleep, and it does not require strict routines. It begins with respect for rest, noticing patterns, noticing what helps you feel calmer in the evening, noticing what makes sleep harder. For many people, small adjustments make a difference. A quieter wind-down period, lower light in the evening, a familiar, repeated routine. Not to control sleep, but to invite it. When sleep improves even slightly, days often feel more manageable. Reactions feel softer. Energy feels steadier. The body feels more cooperative. Sleep supports resilience. Quietly, every night. Ignoring ongoing sleep difficulties often happens because people adapt. But adaptation is not the same as support. Listening to sleep patterns is one way of listening to the body. Without pressure. Without judgment. We've talked about habits that shape how we think, how we move, how we eat, how we connect, and how we rest. The final habit is different again. It's not about comfort or routine. It's about curiosity and what happens when we stop welcoming new experiences. Let's move on to the seventh habit. The seventh habit appears when new experiences are avoided in favor of what feels familiar. Sticking with what's familiar. Keeping routines exactly as they are. Avoiding anything that feels uncertain. At first, this habit feels comfortable, predictable, reassuring. Familiar foods, familiar routes, familiar days that unfold the same way. There is nothing wrong with routine. Routine provides structure, and structure can feel calming. The challenge begins when routine slowly turns into limitation, when curiosity fades, when interest narrows, when the world becomes smaller than it needs to be. Many people tell themselves they're simply content, and sometimes That's true. But often, avoiding new experiences isn't about contentment. It's about hesitation. Worry about not fitting in. Worry about not keeping up. Worry about feeling uncomfortable. So invitations are declined. New ideas are postponed. And possibilities are quietly set aside. Over time, this habit can affect how engaged someone feels with life. Days begin to blend together. Moments feel less memorable. Not because life has less to offer, but because fewer doors are being opened. New experiences don't have to be big. They don't have to be impressive. And they don't have to involve change all at once. Sometimes, they're very small. Taking a different walking route. Trying a new recipe. Listening to a different kind of music. Learning something simple and unfamiliar. These moments gently stimulate the mind. They invite attention. They remind the brain that learning and curiosity still belong here. Avoiding new experiences can also affect confidence. The less often something new is tried, the harder it feels to try again. Not because ability is lost, but because self-trust grows quieter. Healthy aging does not require constant novelty, and it does not mean chasing excitement. It means staying open. Open to learning. Open to adjusting. Open to the idea that growth doesn't end at a certain age. Trying something new doesn't mean changing who you are. It means allowing life to continue meeting you where you are now. Curiosity keeps the inner world active. And an active inner world often brings more meaning to daily life. Not louder, just richer. As we come to the end of these 7 habits, you may notice that none of them are dramatic. They don't arrive suddenly. And they don't announce themselves. They form quietly. Through repetition. Through familiarity. And that's why awareness matters more than effort. Healthy aging is not about fixing yourself. It's about understanding yourself more gently. You don't need to change everything. And you don't need to change quickly. Sometimes, noticing just one habit is enough to shift how a day feels, how a week unfolds, how life feels at this stage. Be patient with yourself, and allow space for small adjustments, if and when they feel right. If one of these habits stood out to you, you're welcome to reflect on it in your own time. And if you'd like more calm conversations like this, focused on healthy aging and daily life, you may consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I'll see you in the next video.